Episode 8, Creating Healthy Habits. Welcome back, friends. I'm Barbara Schnarr, Giatti, and I'm glad you're here. Every week we come together to grow and glow, learning to live more fully and more consciously as we glow from the inside out. This is week 8 of 12 of the Giatti Glow Life Coach series. If you're following along in my 12-week life coaching book, that's fantastic. If you don't have the book, that's absolutely fine, but you will want something to write with and write on. If you'd like to get the book, just go to the About section of Giatti Glow where you found this podcast, and there will be a link to my 12 life coach sessions for coaches and individuals book on Amazon, or you can just go to Amazon and search for Schnarr Coach. That's Schnarr, Schnarr Coach. Schnarr is my maiden name, and that's what I used when I wrote these books. You can support this podcast by buying any of the books or donating on Buy Me a Coffee. The links are on the Giatti Glow description. And if you've made it this far with me, I really appreciate you sticking around. It would sure help me out if you could subscribe, and share this podcast. Thanks. Today we're exploring the world of habits, the powerful forces that shape our lives. Habits create the rhythm of your days. They influence how you feel mentally and physically, and how you show up in the world, and what you can accomplish over time. Even when you're not consciously thinking about them, they are working behind the scenes, constantly shaping your life. Habits matter because they free up mental space, allowing you to move through your day with more energy for the decisions and challenges that matter most. And as those small repeated actions add up, they help reinforce your identity. You start to feel like a healthier person, a more disciplined person, a more grounded person, and all because of the habits you consistently practice. Part 1. Understanding the habit loop. When we talk about creating healthy habits, it's incredibly helpful to understand what's happening beneath the surface, because habits don't form by accident. They follow a very predictable pattern called the habit loop, which has 3 core parts: the cue, the routine, and the reward. Once you learn how this loop is in your own life, habits stop feeling mysterious. They become something you can actually shape, adjust, and intentionally build. Let's break it down. The cue is the trigger, the thing that kicks the habit into motion. It can be something external, like walking into your kitchen, hearing your morning alarm, seeing running shoes by the door. But cues can also be internal, when you feel stressed or bored or anxious or even just tired. These cues are like little signposts that your brain uses to say, oh, okay, this is the moment when I usually do whatever that thing is. The routine is the actual behavior. This is the part we tend to focus on the most because it's the visible action. It's reaching for your phone as soon as you wake up. It's grabbing a snack when you're stressed. It's sitting down with a notebook every night to plan the next day. Whether the habit is helpful or unhelpful, the routine is the part that plays out automatically once the cue appears. And then there's the reward, the benefit you get from completing the routine. The reward is what teaches your brain, yes, this was worth doing. Let's remember this for next time. Rewards can be very subtle. It might be a quick hit of dopamine that you get from checking your notifications, or the comfort of chewing something crunchy when you're stressed, or the sense of calm that comes from your nightly routine. The reward doesn't have to be big. It just has to feel good enough that your brain decides to repeat the loop again. Over time, these 3 pieces get wired together so tightly that your brain begins to automate the whole thing. You don't even think about it anymore. It just happens. That's the beauty and the challenge of habits. They kind of just run quietly in the background, shaping your day without asking permission. So this week, I want you to get curious. Pick one habit you already have, any habit at all. It could be something helpful like making your bed, or something maybe you're not thrilled about like scrolling on your phone while you're eating. Then break it down into the cue, the routine, and the reward. Ask yourself, What usually triggers this behavior? What exactly do I do, step by step? And what do I get from it? Comfort, distraction, pleasure, relief. You're not judging yourself here, you're simply observing with a sense of interest and honesty. Awareness is always your starting point. Before you can change a habit or build a new, healthier one, you first have to understand how the existing pattern works. And once you see the loop clearly, you have the power to reshape it. Part 2, choosing your keystone habit. Now that you understand how the habit loop works, the next step is to choose which habit to build with intention. And here's the thing, you don't need to overhaul your entire life or create 10 new routines at once. In fact, trying to change too much too quickly is one of the fastest ways to burn out and give up. Instead, I want you to choose something called a keystone habit. A keystone habit is one small behavior that naturally creates a positive ripple effects in other areas of your life. It's kind of like a habit that, once established, makes everything else feel easier, smoother, and just a little more aligned. For some people, a keystone habit is drinking a full glass of water first thing in the morning. For others, it might be stretching before bed, or journaling for 5 minutes, or taking a short walk after lunch. These habits look simple on the surface, but what makes them powerful is the momentum they create. Think of a keystone habit as the first domino in a long, beautifully arranged row. Once you tap it, everything else begins to fall into place, even things you weren't directly trying to change. So this week, I want you to choose one habit to focus on, something small, doable, and meaningful. Here are a few questions to help you decide which one. Which habit would make your day feel just a little calmer or clearer? Which habit would improve your energy or mood, even just a little bit? Which habit feels realistic enough that you could begin today without waiting for the perfect moment? When you've identified your keystone habit, write it down, say it out loud, claim it. This step matters because naming it gives your brain something concrete to work with. Vague intentions like be healthier or be more productive don't lead anywhere. But something specific like walk for 5 minutes after lunch, that gives your brain a clear target. And remember, we're not aiming for perfection, we're aiming for consistency that feels kind and manageable. Habit building isn't about force. It's about guiding your brain towards a new automatic pattern, one small cue at a time. Once your keystone habit is chosen, you can begin shaping your environment and your routine in a way that supports it. And we'll get to that in the next session. Part 3, designing your environment for success. One of the most overlooked parts of habit building is your environment. We tend to believe that habits are purely about willpower, about making ourselves do the thing even when we don't feel like it. But in reality, your environment has far more influence on your behavior than motivation ever will. Think of it this way. Your environment can either support your habit or sabotage it. It can remind you of the behavior you want to build, or it can pull you back into old patterns without you even noticing. You are far more likely to follow through on a habit when the environment makes it easy. For example, if your keystone habit is to drink water first thing in the morning, placing a filled glass or bottle next to your bedside table at night helps remove the friction. You don't have to think about it. You wake up, you see it, the cue is right there and ready to guide the routine. If your habit is stretching before bed, you can keep your yoga mat unrolled or within reach. If you want to read more, keeping a book on your pillow or next to your favorite chair makes it almost impossible to miss. If you want to walk after lunch, setting an alarm or keeping your shoes by the door creates a physical or auditory reminder that nudges you in the right direction. Your environment becomes your silent partner in success. On the other hand, if your environment is cluttered with distractions or barriers, even the best intentions can crumble. Think about the habits you're trying to avoid. If you're trying to cut down on mindless doom scrolling, keeping your phone in another room or using app limits is a way to interrupt the habit loop. If you want to reduce late night snacking, storing those foods out of sight or not even buying them at all can completely change the cue. You don't have to rely on willpower when your environment is designed to do the prompting for you. Another important piece is the emotional environment you create for yourself. When you approach a new habit with kindness instead of pressure, your brain feels safe enough to experiment and adapt. A habit grows faster in a supportive inner climate, one where mistakes aren't failures, but information. So this week, imagine your environment as a garden. What needs to be planted? What needs to be cleared out? What small changes could you make to make your new habit feel natural, obvious, and almost unavoidable? Because when your surroundings are aligned with your intentions, the habit loop becomes much easier to reinforce. The cue shows up naturally, the routine unfolds without friction, and the reward comes with less effort. You've essentially set yourself up to succeed without having to fight for it. Part 4. Starting small and staying consistent. One of the biggest misconceptions about habit building is the belief that change has to be dramatic to be meaningful. We imagine that transformation requires big, sweeping actions like hours at the gym or elaborate morning routines or perfectly structured days. And because that vision feels overwhelming, we often don't start at all. Small habits, repeated consistently, create the deepest and most lasting change. Your brain is wired to favor what feels safe and predictable. So when you try to make a huge change overnight, your brain can interpret that shift as a threat, like too much, too fast. But when you introduce something tiny and doable, your brain relaxes. It doesn't resist, it adjusts, allowing the habit to take root one repetition at a time. So instead of asking yourself to commit to something big this week, I want you to go small, like truly small, like ridiculously small. So let's say your keystone habit is journaling. Start with 2 minutes. If you want it to be walking, aim for 5 minutes. If you want to meditate, commit to just 30 seconds of breathing before you begin your day. If it's water, start with 1 glass, not 10. The size of the habit doesn't matter nearly as much as the consistency, because consistency is what teaches our brain, this is who we are now. Consistency builds identity and confidence. It's built from repetition, not intensity. There's also another benefit to starting small. It creates a pattern of success. When your habit is tiny, it becomes difficult to fail. You build it like a streak of wins, and those wins sort of snowball. Every completed habit is like a vote in favor of the person you're becoming. Each vote strengthens the habit loop, making the routine easier and the reward more satisfying. Here's something that people often overlook. Small habits eventually grow. Once a habit feels effortless, your brain is more willing to expand it. 2 minutes of journaling becomes 5. A 5-minute walk becomes 10. A single glass of water becomes steady hydration for your body. The growth feels organic and not forced. But none of this happens if you skip the small beginning. So this week, decide on the smallest version of your keystone habit. Strip it down, simplify it, and make it something you can even do on your busiest, most chaotic, least motivated days. And when you complete it, even if it takes less than a minute, celebrate it. Acknowledge the effort, the intention, and the follow through. That celebration, even if it's just a tiny little whoo, yay, in your brain, acts as the reward. It reinforces the entire habit loop. Because the goal isn't perfection, the goal is consistency, compassion, and momentum. Part 5. Tracking your progress and noticing the wins. If there's one thing that keeps habits alive over the long term, it's awareness. noticing what's working, what feels good, and how your new routines are beginning to shape your life. Tracking isn't about perfection or policing yourself, it's about tuning in to your own growth. When you track a habit, you're shining a light on your effort. You're acknowledging the days that you showed up, even if the action was small. And you're giving your brain a clear signal. This matters. Humans are wired to repeat behaviors that feel meaningful, and tracking gives your progress a kind of significance. Tracking doesn't need to be complicated. It can be as simple as placing a dot on a calendar each day you complete your habit, or checking off a box in your planner, or a quick note on your phone, or a short sentence in your journal. The method doesn't matter. The mindfulness does. Because when you track your habits, you begin to see patterns. You notice the days when your habit feels easier, and the days it requires more intention. You start connecting the dots between your energy, your mood, your environment, and the consistency of your routine. Progress doesn't show up in the habit itself, it shows up in how you feel. Maybe your mood is lifting. Maybe you're sleeping better. Maybe you feel a little more confident or steady or organized. Maybe you're starting to trust yourself a little bit in a little bit deeper way because you're following through on something you promised yourself. And these shifts matter just as much as the visible habit, sometimes even more. When you begin noticing these changes, big or small, you're reinforcing the reward element of the habit loop. Your brain learns, oh, this is good for me. This feels better than before. Let's keep doing this. The loop becomes self-sustaining. But tracking isn't about creating pressure. It's not about shaming yourself for missed days, or it's not about chasing a perfect streak. There will always be days when life gets busy and emotions get heavy, or when routine slips, and that's all completely normal. Missing a day doesn't reset your progress, it just gives you some information. If you notice you've missed 2 or 3 days, instead of spiraling into self-criticism, simply pause and ask, what made this harder? What cue or environmental support might help me? How can I make this habit feel easier again? These self-adjustments help keep habits alive. And don't forget to celebrate your wins, every single one of them. A tiny check mark can represent a huge shift in how you show up for yourself. Let yourself feel proud of the consistency you're building, not just about completing a habit, but you're strengthening a trust that you have in your ability to grow. Tracking isn't just about marks on a page. It's about recognizing the person you're becoming through small, meaningful actions. Part 6. Navigating setbacks with self-compassion. Every habit journey, no matter how intentional, organized, or deeply aligned, will come with setbacks. People don't talk about it, and because of that, it's easy to feel like you're doing something wrong when the momentum slows or you miss a day or 3. Setbacks aren't failures, they're part of the process. They're normal, expected, and actually incredibly informative if you approach them with curiosity instead of judgment. When you hit a dip in consistency, your mind might automatically move towards self-criticism. Thoughts like, I messed everything up, or I never stick to anything, come rushing in. This is the exact moment when your practice becomes less about the habit itself and more about your relationship with yourself. Because consistency isn't just about repetition, it's about learning to return after you drift. When you approach a setback with self-compassion, you're teaching your brain something powerful, that you can make mistakes and still choose to continue. This message builds resilience. It builds emotional safety, and it ensures that your habit becomes a long-term pattern instead of a short-lived burst of motivation. So when you fall out of your routine, I want you to pause, not to judge, but to reflect. Ask yourself, what got in the way? Was it stress, exhaustion, a schedule change, a shift in mood? Or maybe did the cue disappear? Did the routine feel too big? Did the reward no longer land? Every answer gives you insight into where the habit loop might need adjusting. Remember, habits aren't rigid, they're flexible. You can modify cues, shorten routines, amplify rewards, and create new supports whenever you need them. You always get to resume. Your habit doesn't reset, your progress doesn't evaporate. You simply pick up the thread and continue weaving. Sometimes resuming means going back to the smallest version of the habit. Sometimes it means reestablishing your environment or reconnecting with why the habit matters to you in the first place. And sometimes resuming just means taking a deep breath and saying, okay, I'm ready to try again. I want you to think of yourself the way you think of a close friend. If they missed a few days in their new habit, you wouldn't shame them. You wouldn't tell them they failed. You'd encourage them, reminding them of their progress, their effort, and their capacity to begin again. Offer yourself the same kindness. The truth is, setbacks will often strengthen your habit more than the easy days. They teach you to return with patience. They show you how to adapt. They remind you that you're human and that your growth doesn't depend on perfection. It depends on compassion, perseverance, and the willingness to keep moving forward. Your habits become more resilient each time you choose to come back. Part 7. Reinforcing your identity through habit. One of the most powerful aspects of building healthy habits is something people rarely talk about: the shift in identity that happens when you follow through. When you practice a habit consistently, even in tiny ways, you're not just changing your behavior, you're changing the way you see yourself. Think about it this way: every action you take casts a vote for the type of person you are becoming. If you drink water first thing in the morning, you're casting a vote for, I am someone who takes care of my body. If you stretch before bed, you're voting for, I am someone who prioritizes my well-being. If you take a 5-minute walk at lunch, you're reinforcing, I am someone who honors my energy and movement. And these votes add up, not overnight, not big, huge, dramatic leaps, but gradually and steadily in a way that feels surprisingly natural. And the more your identity shifts, the easier these habits become, because you're not forcing yourself to do something anymore. You're simply acting in alignment with who you believe you are. The identity piece is crucial, especially on days when motivation is low. Motivation comes and goes. Identity stays. When you see yourself as a person who follows through, even when the habit is small, you stop negotiating with yourself. The habit becomes part of your character rather than something you're trying to squeeze into your schedule. And identity works in both directions. If your habits shape your identity can shape your habits. So that's why it's important to choose a habit that feels meaningful, a habit that aligns with the version of yourself that you're growing into, a habit that whispers, this is who you are becoming. So this week, I want you to play with this idea a little bit. Ask yourself, who am I becoming through this habit? What kind of person does this habit reinforce? What identity do I want to grow into over time? For example, if your keystone habit is journaling for 2 minutes each morning, maybe the identity you're building is, I am someone who reflects before I react. If your habit is a small nightly stretch routine, the identity might be, I am someone who listens to my body. These identity statements guide you. You don't have to say them out loud if it feels strange, but do let them sit with you. Let them take root. Because identity is the anchor that keeps the habit grounded, even when life gets messy. And here's a little bonus. The more you reinforce a positive identity, the harder it becomes to slip back into the old patterns. Not because of guilt or pressure, but because the old habits no longer fit the person you're becoming. You are growing and evolving, and you're stepping into a version of yourself that feels more authentic, more grounded, more aligned with what you truly want. Part 8. Celebrating your progress and letting the habit settle in. One of the most underappreciated parts of building lasting habits is celebration. Not the big, grand celebrations, though those do have their place, but the quiet ones, the small acknowledgments, the moments when you pause and you say to yourself, "Oh, I did it." Because celebration isn't just feel good stuff, it's actually a powerful reinforcement tool. It tells your brain, this matters, this feels good, let's do it again. We often underestimate how far we've come because our brains are wired to scan for what's missing, not what's working. We focus on the days we have struggled instead of the days we succeeded. We zoom in on what we haven't done right and skip over the stuff we've already accomplished. But habits grow stronger when you make space to appreciate your effort. Celebration can be subtle. It could be just a nice deep breath of satisfaction after completing your habit, or a smile, or a little nice job, or sort of an internal pat on the back. It could be just checking off that box in your planner or seeing the dots line up on your calendar. It could be simply noticing that it felt easier today than it did a few weeks ago. These tiny celebrations strengthen and reward that part of your habit loop. And when the reward feels meaningful, even if it's just a little emotion reward, you reinforce the behavior in a way that becomes automatic over time. So here's the next step. Once you've built some consistency, it's time to let the habit settle in. This means shifting from building the habit to simply living it. In the beginning, you put a lot of thought into your cues, your environment, your tracking, your small steps. But as the habit becomes more natural, you notice you don't have to think about it as much. It just becomes part of the flow of your day, and something you just do without thinking about it. This is the moment when the habit has moved from the conscious part of your brain to the automatic part. You're no longer forcing it. You're no longer managing it. You're simply doing it because it's part of who you are now. And that shift is worth celebrating too. So letting a habit settle in almost means letting go of perfection. Even established habits will occasionally wobble. Life gets busy, schedules change, emotions rise and fall. But the difference is now that you have the tools to return quickly and gently. You know your cues. You know your environment. You know how to scale the habit down when needed. And you know how to treat yourself kindly when you stumble. You're not just practicing a behavior, you're practicing resilience. As your habit becomes more stable, you may even find that it naturally starts expanding. Like 5 minutes of walking becomes 10 because it feels good. Or 2 minutes of journaling becomes 5 because your thoughts need more space. 1 glass of water becomes 2 because your body is grateful. You don't force the growth, it just happens on its own. And when it does, that's a sign that the habit has truly settled in. So this week, take time to notice your wins, every single one of them. Let yourself feel proud of the effort you've made and the identity that you're shaping. This journey is not just about building a habit. It's about building trust in yourself, one small action at a time. So part 9, wrapping this up. As we wrap up this week's exploration of healthy habits, I want you to take a moment to really acknowledge what you've just done. You didn't just learn about cues and routines and rewards. You didn't just think about the environment or consistency or identity. You've taken a brave step in understanding yourself more deeply. And that is the foundation of every meaningful change you'll ever make. Building habits isn't about perfection. It's not about grinding your way to some ideal version of yourself. It's about choosing each day to live in alignment with your values. It's about honoring what matters to you, about showing up, sometimes boldly, sometimes not so boldly, but always with intention. This week you learned how your brain creates patterns, how small actions accumulate into big transformations, and how setbacks can teach you just as much as progress. You learned that identity grows from repetition and that celebration strengthens your commitment. and that compassion is the glue that holds everything together. My hope is that when you leave this episode, you feel empowered, not by the size of your habit, but by the ownership you have over your journey. So as you continue forward, remember this: change doesn't happen all at once. It happens moment by moment, choice by choice, repetition by repetition. You are capable of remarkable things, especially when you take them in one small, consistent step at a time. So next week, we'll be tackling something I've been putting off: overcoming procrastination. Thanks for being here, for listening, and for showing up for your growth. See you next week. Giatti Glow is powered by the Life Coach Store, which is owned by me, Barb Giatti. On my website, you can find all kinds of great resources for over 20 types of wellness coaches. Check out thelifecoach.store for more information.